right, welcome. We appreciate you being here. Welcome to the launch of SportsINNO. My name is Darren Roberts. I serve as founding director of the Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation here at the University of Texas, and as a faculty member in the College of Liberal Arts. The Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation was created in 2014 to cultivate the character development, leadership skills, and long-term welfare of athletes and coaches. In addition to delivering a leadership and financial literacy course to all of our freshman athletes here at the University of Texas, CSLI hosts the varsity captains of high schools from Austin Independent School District for our program called Captains Academy. We've also brought Kevin Durant and Mia Hamm to the 40 acres to discuss best practices in sports leadership. This event marks the beginning of a partnership between the Herb Keller Center for Entrepreneurship, led by the incomparable Dr. Lewis Martins, and CSLI, and we have one goal: to expose the university to the top leaders and researchers in sports innovation. We are delighted that you are joining us this evening, and we hope that this will prove to be an extraordinary experience. And it is my pleasure to introduce the program manager for HKC, Ashley Jennings. Please welcome Ashley.
Hello. Thanks for being here this evening. My name is Ashley Jennings. I'm one of the program managers of the Herb Keller Center for Entrepreneurship, Growth, and Renewal here at UT. We're housed out of McCombs, and we serve all of our undergraduate and graduate students across campus who are working on startups, so founders, entrepreneurs. We try to bring all of the different innovation centers together in collaboration, rising tides for the startup community here in Austin, and so we're so excited for this official partnership with CSLI. Thank you for being here, all of our sponsors, Flow Sports, thank you for our incredible panelists who came in from across the country tonight. Without further ado, I just want to kick it off and get the conversation going by introducing our amazing moderator. Mark Phillip is the CEO and founder of Are You Watching This?, a B2B sports excitement analytics company identifying the most exciting sporting events in real time. Companies like CBS, Fox Sports, Sporting News, and Telstra use the data to enhance the game-watching experience for casual and die-hard fans alike. A Brooklyn-born, Austin-based MIT dropout, Mark can also point you to the best Chinese food while at any Austin or any New York airport. So without further ado, dear friend, Mark Phillip.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am really excited about this. This is going to be a ton of fun. We don't have a lot of time, so we're just going to jump right in. Danny. Case Keenum is the quarterback right now for the Denver Broncos. For those who don't know Case Keenum, he's a bit of a journeyman. He's played for about 5 or 6 different teams. And as I was researching everyone, this stat about Danny and his company Striver popped out. Last year, Case Keenum had the best QBR rate, which is a metric of how well he performs, when he was being blitzed than any other quarterback in the NFL. Also, his yards per attempt and his completion percentage were actually better when he was being blitzed than when he wasn't being rushed. Now, there's a strong connection between Striver and Case Keenum. So Danny, tell us about you, tell us about Striver, and tell us about Case.
Awesome, yes. I'm Danny. I run strategy and marketing for our company. It's called Striver. Striver is a immersive training platform that allows people to get better training than they've ever gotten before through the medium of virtual reality. How many people here have put on a virtual reality headset before? Almost everyone. That's very different than 2 years ago. We allow players like Case Keenum to get endless repetitions like he is actually on the field, but he's just sitting in his meeting room or in the Vikings or Broncos facility on a couch at his home with a headset on. So last year, the stat was that he watched 2,467 extra repetitions over the course of the year. So that's like basically Case Keenum doing practice for the whole year, and then 3 times practice with all those extra reps. So you tell me how good you'll be when you can practice 3 times as much as your competitor. VR and our product allows basically Case Keenum and any player that uses it to get all those repetitions and basically slow down the game so that decisions become second nature. You don't have to think, you just react. And that's what VR and Striver do.
Alan, when your personal cross-country career ended at UC Boulder, you immediately went into coaching, and you pretty much spent every second since helping athletes get better. And so I want to hear more about Striver and Team USA, but let's zoom out a little bit. So your title is?
Chief of Sport Performance for the U.S. Olympic Committee.
So we all know what a personal trainer is. We all can kind of wrap our heads around that. But when we're talking about thousands of athletes across dozens of sports, what is your job?
So my job at the Olympic Committee is really to try to figure out how to take the resources of the U.S. Olympic Committee and deploy them in the best way to help individual athletes and teams achieve success on the field of play internationally. And when you think about that, it's a really customized, individualized, very specific approach depending on what sport it is, what athletes there are. There are 50 national governing bodies. We have the Olympics, we have the Paralympics. And the goal is to take, science, medicine, technology, innovation, funding, and support, and really figure out a way to maximize that impact on the individual so that they can go out and achieve their dream on the field of play and represent our country at the Olympic and Paralympic Games.
Angelina. So if we rewind a few years, you're working with the Tampa Bay Lightning. You're working in corporate communications. You fast forward to now, and you're running a sales enablement company. You're the leader in the space that is currently $750 million. And in a few years, we expect it to get to $5 billion. For me, sales enablement was completely new in the sports world. Tell us about it, and tell us how you got to Sports Digital.
It is a great niche, for sure. It is definitely a sweet spot in the whole digital footprint that is happening right now in sports and really in the whole enterprise world. And really the way I got there was I was working for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we were doing everything on PowerPoint. So I'm the founder of Sports Digita, and what we have is a great product called the DigiDeck. And what I like to say about that is it's like PowerPoint on steroids. I know it's a wrong, bad word, but I mean, that's the best way to tell you about it. It's interactive, it's video, it's CRM, it's analytics, and all that. So when I was at the Lightning, we were pitching 6-7-figure deals on paper, on sheets, on PDFs, and they were, misaligned, bad logos, not the right logos, wrong messaging, and so what I did was I wanted to come up with something better, and so this is how I started to think about the whole concept of the DigiDeck. And so what I was doing for the Lightning, I felt like I could do for really all teams. So we're about 400 teams now between professional, collegiate, minors. We work with the biggest brands in sports, people that you would think would not need us, but I was just at an event right before this, just telling them that the biggest brands are the ones that actually use us. They're the ones that want to push the envelope. It's the Yankees, it's the Lakers, it's the Cowboys. They're all looking for ways to push it, and they're using our products. So that's how the sales enablement, it's a $750 million industry that will be $5 billion by 2020. So it's a good sweet spot, it's a good niche.
Great. Before we get to Roger, if you are a Dish TV customer, I have some bad news for you. HBO will not work. For the first time in HBO's 40-year history, they've gone dark on a provider. You might have heard this with other folks. Univision's been dark for a while. beIN Sports got dropped from Comcast. There's lots of tussles often happening between providers and these networks. But this one is a little different because for a lot of people, you can just go to HBO Now, HBO Go. Things are different now because of OTTs. We've all used an OTT. You just may not realize it. I recently cut the cord. I'm a YouTube TV guy and adore it. You probably have Hulu. You might have Netflix. You might have some other one in that family. But it's hard to think about OTT without speaking about Disney streaming services, previously known as BAMTech, previously owned by MLBAM. So Roger, catch us up on the history of OTT.
Sure.
And why are you the starting point for it? Or at least, why do I think you're the starting point for it?
Well, I would walk through the journey of, it's circuitous, but we started out as Major League Baseball Advanced Media, who had the exclusive digital media rights to effectively monetize and go direct to consumer with baseball or live baseball game content. And then effectively started in the early 2000s. Through those early days, you had stamp size video streaming. It was very, very early. 2008 is the first time we streamed 720p full HD. It was a struggle. This was before even Netflix had a full digital media product. And so through those early days, we learned a lot about going direct to consumer, and really direct to consumer and OTT. I fundamentally classify it or describe it as content creators, content rights owners, content owners going direct to consumer digitally and foregoing the classic cable satellite receiver chain. And so over the years, we ended up upping our game, taking on more third-party business, including WWE Network, who actually should get a good deal of credit because they effectively went to war with the MVPDs over at pay-per-views and went digital direct. HBO Now was a brand and product that we integrated and launched on behalf of HBO. So for those Dish people, that's a potential option. We also did some work with ESPN, and then quite a few others, but landed at this point. Yes, last year when Disney sought its path to control to purchase us after us spinning off from MLBAM to BAMTech Media to Disney streaming services.
So let's talk about the living room. So you have probably a large pipe coming in, or at least content coming in through a pipe that spans sports, spans content, could be any sort of genre. One topic that's been big lately has been around VR and AR. So do you see VR trying to invade the living room in the same way 3D tried to take over the living room?
I actually am interested to hear more on Dan's actual distributed notion of VR, because some of the working examples that I've seen has been really, there's a lot of constraints about rendering and compute having to occur in a centralized location that requires a good deal of power. So an example, shameless plug, The Void, which is partially owned by Disney, has effectively a locations, I believe around 6 around the country, to where you go in and then you have an immersive experience. You wear a vest and a large goggle, and you're connected, and rendering and compute occurs into a centralized server room, but you get like blast furnace heat, you get buzzing, and you get the immersive feel entertainment notion. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more from Dan around, more explicit, more scholastic and fine-tuning of skills. But I'm curious in the sense of how deep and wide and distributed it can go in the living room, because to have a real quick twitch, quick pan notion of rendering within a living room perspective, I'm not quite certain that it's fully there yet from a distributed computer and living room perspective. Not to say it won't be there, but I think that's one of the major hindrances of going wider.
You make a lot of good points. We're at Striver, we have a very specific and niche view on VR. We don't believe VR is good for 3-hour-long football games or baseball games. We believe in short, targeted, kind of like micro approaches. So all of our training that we do and everything we do in VR is like between 5 and 15 minutes. So, and that's even a long time for VR. I don't know if anyone of you wore in VR for 15 minutes, you're ready to take it off. So how are we gonna watch live sports or live movies or TV if we only can take it for 15 minutes. So I don't think VR is ready for the living room. I actually would put AR ahead because you don't have to wear something. Also the qualities, you know, so how many K are we up to in TVs? 8K? Like VR right now, the computing power is not there yet. You see, it's a screen door effect. You're too far away, you can't get right near the action. With those cameras and all those sports, you can get right up to, you know, you can see the hair on the face. That's how close you can get. So there's so many things blocking VR right now, in our opinion, for the living room. But I love it for short experiences. Love it. 5, 10 minutes, great. Take it off.
So there's lots of challenges with it, whether it's computing, whether it's how much time you can stand it for a certain amount of whether it's enjoyment or training. And the training part is where I want to ask you, Alan. We were talking earlier about capturing a lot of this data. And it's easy to think about, I can sit on my couch in my sweatpants and be comfortable and fly through Paris. But I don't think about how that was actually captured. And we were talking about the elements. So if someone's trying to capture a ski slope, it's not exactly the simplest thing in the world to do. So could you tell us a little bit about how VR has impacted you?
Yeah, and I think, you know, this is a really interesting topic because of, so let's say you're a downhill racer, you know, the Olympic Games, downhill's 1.5 miles, 2 miles long. You're starting at high altitude, temperatures are cold. The course is really hard to maintain. So you can't always capture the same information. So you've got to figure out a way to basically capture it effectively in one period of time so that ultimately the athletes can then utilize it over and over again to understand where the jumps are, where the turns are, where the drop-offs are. And you know, it is very difficult to capture because you have to have battery life, you have to have all the elements put together so that you can essentially get the information and then use it in an effective way so that the athletes can actually run a downhill or run a portion of the downhill over and over and over again without actually having to physically do it. And you know, in a sport like skiing where you're outdoors and it is so difficult to prepare the courses, I mean, there may be days where you can't actually go out on the course because it snows so much. They can't keep it clear, can't keep it safe. But if you actually have the data and you can actually watch it and you can experience the course over and over again, you're way ahead of your competitors. And this is, in my opinion, in a dangerous sport that's out in the elements where, you know, it's really difficult to train. These are huge advantages that if we can do them right, make a big difference for our athletes.
Not to mention, what's the difference between silver, gold?
Yep, I remember in Nagano, Peekaboo Street, you know, was 1/100th of a second from winning a gold medal. She got a silver medal, but you know, the difference is that little bit of extra training that you get through something like VR. It's amazing.
Do you ever get pushback from athletes?
Some athletes you do, some you don't. I mean, I think, you know, the whole idea behind all this is to present them with something that, you know, is a solution for them. Let them evaluate it and determine how to implement it into their training regime. And then once, you know, that's the adoption has to come from the individual. You know, it can't be one of those top-down things, you must use this. Instead, it's like, here's something that's good, that maybe could help you. Try it out, see if it fits, see if it works. And in most cases, you know, athletes are very smart about their career and about their training, and they'll see the benefit of these things if they're, you know, when there is one, for sure.
This tech is robust, this tech isn't cheap, and Team USA pays for it for a lot of these athletes. But I think there's also a flip side where there's real opportunity to make revenue here. And that's something I found as I was researching Sports Digita is pretty fascinating. So I'm a big Yankees fan. It pains me to no end that the Red Sox are world champions right now. But as I was reading some of the case studies, especially about the Yankees, there was a section about overseas sponsors. And if you watch any Yankees game, if you watch any Seattle Mariners game, often you'll see a lot of foreign sponsors. And there was an interesting segment about how the Yankees used technology through Sports Digita to overlay the sponsors into what it would actually look like and what an impact it had for those folks who had never been to Yankee Stadium before.
Right, and so it's a little bit different from, for sure, the VR, and in my world, we're figuring out how to incorporate that into pitches and things like that. And so if we can figure out how to monetize that better, we have, tried, and we're really putting our heads together on how to make that happen. But as far as what we are using, we have a 360 pano technology that we go in and we shoot during game day. We'll sit on center court, we'll be on center field, and we'll shoot either during the game or not the game. And then what we've done is we've brought it a step further, so if there is a potential sponsor that wants to integrate with the brand, we can actually, in our product, go on the back end and have about 50 hotspots. So we're patenting the technology now just to just to be able to enable the salespeople or anyone that they're, whether it's game day experience, whatever it is, just to be able to visualize how their brand interacts with the Yankees or the Red Sox or whatever. So it's a great way for us to be able to show that, and actually during game day we can put videos up on the scoreboard, we can do it in the dasher boards and all that, so that's really cool. So, but I mean, that definitely, the VR is one step further, and so I know a lot of teams I'm sure you're talking to a lot of teams about that, just trying to figure out how to incorporate that for sure, because it's the next best, great thing, for sure.
It impacts revenue for you guys, and I'm curious, I won't make you put on looking at the crystal ball too much, but speaking of 360s at courtside, how soon until I can plunk down money and sit courtside and watch LeBron in LA?
I think the different product implications in arena and stadium on site, it's actually quite a few interesting avenues it can go, particularly in the AR realm. The advances, particularly on these cameras on these phones, cameras in cars, the ability to capture depth is actually at a dramatic pace. In many ways, the ability to measure and capture depth on these phones allows for the notions of AR experiences where you're at the ballpark, Yankee Stadium, and then you effectively do an overlay and contextualization of, oh, the line to this bathroom is actually 2 people deep. Oh, I can get chili cheese fries at this location. And the monetization, the angles from there, tease out new features from an in-stadium experience. We see a lot in that direction, and we've had some discussions, and I'm sure you have as well, as that's actually probably one of the better in-experiences uses of AR, VR, use them interchangeably. But it really is, we've seen AR being actually an opportunity to go in deeper because of what you can do with camera depth. And I would say, and it'd be a good thing to tease out with you as well, but with camera depth, you can also capture representations of experiences in sport. So you can actually get to the point and measure and validate subjective sports. And I don't know if there is a willingness to actually get to the point of removing subjectivity and judging from certain sports, but the point where you actually really authoritatively measure, did that pole vault happen in an appropriate, reliable means of execution? So.
No, and I think technology is actually moving, more and more into those objective measures on a pretty regular basis now. But there's a cultural piece to it, which is this is the way we've done it, and there's the officials play a big role in sports, and their judgment and that sort of thing is important and is part of the tradition and history. But I also think that it kind of goes back to the end of the athletes. I mean, the athletes are looking at it and going, let's find the most reliable ways to basically measure and to so that we have objective data to go off of, and that includes everything from how far did you jump to being able to take a look at video and have judges review close calls in such a way that ultimately they're not just left watching it once and then trying to make a judgment call as to a score or degree of difficulty, but instead can review it. So I think we continue to move in that area. It's a clash of cultures a little bit in some cases, but I hopefully believe that the athletes end up driving a lot of this from the standpoint of they're looking for the best ways to measure their success and to do it accurately and to do it fairly.
And then I would say back in 2008, we were part of, just to track back, MLBAM, BAMTech, Disney. During the MLBAM phase, we implemented instant replay for baseball, which from an objective measure perspective was actually quite a thing to do to convince the officiating union of baseball to comply with that and to go into the ballpark install and to effectively execute and implement that. But it feels like maybe it's I don't want to say declaratively a gathering storm across all sports, but objective measure seems to be a direction that so many sports are adopting.
I think if you approach it more as another tool for officials to use versus a replacement for officials, I mean, the officials are an important part of the sport.
Yeah.
You know, the volunteers that come out and the people that basically support our infrastructure and sport are really important. But if you can put more tools in their hands, just like you try to put tools in the athletes' hands to do even a better job, it's a kind of a plus up. It's a win-win.
Danny, do any referees use Striver?
Pardon, say that again?
Do any referees use Striver?
All 4 major officiating bodies in all 4 major sports leagues use Striver. So NFL referees, NBA referees, hockey referees, and umpires.
So I think we can get into the tech almost too much, and I want to zoom out a second. Angelina, because of where your company sits, it feels like from afar you might see trends before we do. What's going on in venues, what's going on in sort of stadium groups. Is there anything that you might see sort of coming down the line as far as sponsorships or where ad dollars are moving that maybe we haven't seen yet if you're just the average fan?
I would say, I mean, the things that we're seeing, I don't know if it's, I think the internet brings the information out pretty quickly, whether you're on Twitter or on the internet, but the things that we're seeing that we're interested in is esports, for sure. We just had some of our people out in Las Vegas. That was like the first big ever huge conference out there on that. Little bit old, but the jersey sponsorships, that's big. I'd love to see that move into the other sports. Gambling is huge right now as far as just with the new laws this week, the new NHL whole sponsorship with MGM just happened this week. That's huge, I think. Just as more of these states are opening up, you're going to see a lot more of that. And then zeroing it down a little bit more as far as when our teams, our partners are pitching out, I think the biggest trend that we're seeing in that kind of micro view is just really pitching. So I'll take, for instance, let's say the Minnesota Twins, if they're going to pitch to Delta Airlines, everything now is about the partner. It's not long ago, it was you would go into a big pitch and the Minnesota Twins would tell you who their players are, how great their stadium is, who works there, all the things about them. And then now that whole transition is they're going in and like now your pitch is truly about Delta. So that's the biggest thing I see. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense to what I'm talking into here right now, but it really is a movement, whereas it was not that before. So that's really what I'm seeing there on the inside for who they're pitching. I think we're going to see a lot more of our pitch decks because we do have that kind of best practices. We know who they're pitching to. I think we're going to see a lot more pitch decks to gambling, to casinos, to Caesars, to the MGMs and things like that. So that's what we're seeing.
Alan, esports. There's rumblings that it might end up attached, maybe involved in U.S. Olympics, or I should say Olympics as a whole via IOC. But there's already been a line drawn in the sand that violent games aren't going to be included. So you assume you're looking at the sports franchises mainly. I'm curious, just as a wide open greenfield question, how do you feel about esports involved in Team USA?
Yeah, it's a very wide open question right now for sure, because I think the International Olympic Committee is pretty engaged in trying to explore where this goes. There's obviously lots of teams and lots of momentum around it right now. I think it's just really kind of trying to figure out where the place fits within the Olympic movement, and how you kind of position it in there. I was talking to somebody about this, and they're saying, well, a sport like shooting, it's not like you're have to be the fittest athlete on the field to shoot, but you have to have a precision and a certain capability that is extraordinary. But that kind of then also, sort of flows into the esports capability of the players. And so I think there is a place for it. How it manifests itself, whether it gets included in a summer games or winter games, or maybe it's standalone. I think those things are all, still way up in the air, but it is a very kind of front and center question right now. It's a good question. I think it's one we ought to take a serious look at, because I think the other part that would be good is that if you can get all the individuals who play esports to think about the Olympic movement, to think about the Olympic values, to make it part of the social fabric and culture, it's got a really good positive outcome on it. So that's kind of where I'm thinking right now.
I feel like I've already asked this question, but Danny, what about esports and Striver? Are there esports players that use Striver to practice?
We have no esports now. When I think about the way that our product works, and we're trying to give athletes that edge and help them perform better on the field, I don't know how I could help an esports athlete prepare for battle.
Well, we see how you feel. I mean, if you're using air quotes, we understand how you feel about it. I mean, let me be devil's advocate. If Case Keenum isn't throwing a ball when he's wearing the headset, it's about making decisions and getting reps.
Yep.
Is that not the same as esports?
True. I guess I don't know enough other decisions to make when you're. I know it's a lot of controllers, but I guess what you see, there's a decision to go right. I mean, yeah, I guess if you look at it that way, sure, potentially. Yeah. I mean, VR, like what our whole tenet is, our whole company is based around, is repetition and practice and seeing it before you actually do it. So if there is an element to esports where if you see it 100 times more than your competitor, you're going to have that much of an edge, whether you're Peekaboo Street or someone playing esports. I guess, what's the big deal?
So I think the other thing about esports that's interesting, and you see this already starting to evolve with the teams, is that they're taking into consideration things like nutrition, sleep, sort of the whole person health and wellness of the individual, because all those things contribute to your capability of maintaining focus and performing at a high level. And again, I kind of look at that as a good thing from a holistic standpoint, a humanistic standpoint, because ultimately, if you're thinking about better nutrition, if you're thinking about your sleep habits, if you're thinking about taking better care of yourself as a human being, as a result of a sport, whether it's esports or anything else, that's a good thing. And so I think, those are sort of concepts that transcend just simply the classic sports of the Olympic Games, but transcend into our new thinking, and can be really good influencers.
Danny, I know I put you on the spot there. I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Sure.
But I think this one will be a little bit easier. Wave a magic wand. What is the sport you wish Striver could be ready to have an impact in tomorrow that you haven't touched yet?
Anything that has a lot of movement. So soccer, basketball, hockey to a degree. The one limitation that VR cannot defy right now is the laws of physics. So you cannot strap a camera to someone's head and then get, basketball player running down the court and then go back in VR and watch it. You're going to get nauseous and sick. You're just not. Trust me, Striver's done this for a while. You're going to get nauseous and sick. So, but that eliminates so many sports, that eliminates so many positions in sports. In soccer, goalies are great, but that's about it, just because they're more static. Basketball, you can kind of maybe like a point guard and where should you sort of pass the ball, but you still make decisions while you're moving. So I would say, to answer your question, anything relating to players that move and make decisions at the same time. Football stands out because you are static right before the play happens. So there's so many decisions to make while you're static. Totally works. Downhill skiing, frankly enough, we've actually got it such that because you are in a static position, that actually works. A point guard or a center who needs to make decisions, the movement is really tough. And the last thing we want to do is make an athlete sick, because what will they do? They will throw it away and they will never do it again. Right? So it's the last thing we want to do.
Angelina, of all the stats I've seen, I found Case Keenum fascinating, but the idea that your industry is going to go from $750 million to $5 billion in just a few years is fascinating. And it made me question why I haven't heard of it before, but as I start to read more about it and read all these use cases, it's obvious that you've hit a market. You found a need that was just completely underserved. So as we go from where we are now to this $5 billion number, what do you see as the big enablers? Is there a tech that's going to get you there? Is there better sales that's going to get you there? What do you think it is that's going to make this industry big and keep you as the leader?
Well, I think that the digital footprint is really the key message. I think that we're moving away from a very traditional marketing model and we're going to digital. So everything now is online. Before, you were doing everything, like I said before earlier, on paper and PDFs and things like that. So what's happening is that companies are the ones that are going to move this forward because they are now making this a very strong initiative within their company. You know, it's the going online, and it's your internet, it's your website presence, it's all the things that is your kind of curb appeal. And now that I feel the final component is your sales tools. And people are no longer wanting to do PowerPoint, and they are wanting to integrate their sales and marketing teams together. There's much more of an initiative with that. And with that comes, you know, the analytics and the CRM and making that all a much smarter tool within that digital footprint. So I would just say the emergence and the importance of the digital footprint, whether it be at a team or at an enterprise, you know, company. We work with United Healthcare. You would think a company like that is already well on their way, but we've been in there with 3 or 4 different groups that are just trying to marry all of their sales and marketing and their decks, their presentations together. So I think that for us, we're just going to continue to be ahead of it. You know, technology changes. I mean, I'm up here with all these people. Technology changes daily. And what our product was, you know, a month ago with all of our iterations and our sprints and things like that, it just changes. And so is that my mic? Sorry. But just as far as, you know, the iPhone, all the iterations of that, I mean, that's how our product is. I just had a new iPhone, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. My son works for Apple, and he's already like, Mom, you have to get the new one already. And I'm just like, okay, what's the difference? He goes, well, it's got a bigger screen. And I'm like, okay. So just that's how our product is. It's moving quickly, but the whole of the companies with that initiative is what's going to move it forward.
I mean, sometimes there's technology just for technology's sake.
Right.
But it's also important to have, you know, a vision on where we're going. And Alan, when we were chatting earlier, we were talking about how often you get pitched new tech, and I can't imagine how often it happens. And often they don't always pass muster. But of all the pitches you get, let's say you could wave a magic wand as we continue this future-looking stuff, and you could make them all actually work in the way that the sales deck said it would. Is there a tech that you've seen that you wish you could bring to Team USA right now?
Well, there's probably a few of them. I mean, I think, you know, a couple areas where I'm really focused right now is actually trying to, you know, we measure a lot of different things. You might measure, you know, physiology. You can measure, you know, like medical health, and you can measure anthropometry. You can basically, you can gather a ton of data, but the ability to actually consolidate that data and present it in such a way that the athletes find it valuable and the coaches find it valuable is really, I think, one of the big steps we've got to kind of figure out for the future. And, you know, it's everything from strength and conditioning to nutrition to sports psychology to, you know, mental health to just the individual characteristics of each person. You know, we do a lot of testing where we look and try to figure out, like, are there places where an individual is susceptible to injury or illness, so that ultimately we can help them design their training so that they avoid becoming injured and they stay healthy and happy. And, you know, that's the most important part. And, you know, pieces of that are coming together now, but I don't see that anybody has completely solved that problem yet, where it is consolidating down important data into really useful bites that the athletes can use to impact their training, to understand their recovery, to make sure that they are absolutely in the best place health-wise, physically, mentally, technically, tactically, to continue to improve. Because I think if we get to that place, the sky's the limit of what human endeavor can do.
Roger. Last but not least, let's look into your future. So, MO BAM Tech, now Disney. You are a behemoth, for lack of a better word. You are the companies go to when they want to broadcast over the internet. What scares you? Who could ever challenge Disney streaming services?
There's quite a few options out there. I would also say on the journey, my personal journey included University of Texas. I actually attended undergrad and graduate business school here. What actually, the gravity of it is more, I think, more accurate of what gets to me. Because to actually execute at this level from an OTT repurposing of content that you're trying to engage with your customers requires new ways of marketing, new ways of engagement, new ways to measure, new ways to experiment. Experimentation is actually one of the key benefits of OTT, but that's the job, really. So I'm not really afraid, but I'm actually reminded through my personal journey of going from baseball, of a parent or a dad or a mother taking their kid to a first game, the gravity of that, the gravity of attenuating the performance of Olympic athletes or your professional athletes that go through VR experience with Striver. I'm reminded of experience when I went to Disneyland where I met a single mother taking her son. She saved her tax refund and her savings as a gift to her son. This was the biggest manifestation of love that she can think of. And that's extraordinarily powerful amount of incredible engagement that mother to one's child says. And so that really is the part that's my concern. Is looking forward to and executing within that frame. Because everything else is just a job. So I think maybe what scares me in the end on a personal note is really cynicism. Cynicism that takes away the narratives of these athletes that achieve in the sports arena. Cynicism that takes away from appreciating wonder, appreciating performance and excellence.
Well, you've heard me ask my questions. Now it's your turn. Does anyone have anything for any of the panelists? Be brave. Yeah, right there.
I actually see both. I see consolidation in the notion of platforms, of what Prime Video represents. Netflix is a platform of sorts, really. And you can say what a lot of companies in the media space, I won't name them all, but they're consolidating as well. So I know at least maybe 18 months ago, there's a talk of appification. There's going to be an app for everything. I think we're at that point now where we're probably going to consolidate around a choice set of apps. There's still diversity. So I wouldn't typify the industry as one of purely platform and purely fragmentation. But I would say individual properties are more fragmented. How one engages, or actually seems to, it feels like it's getting more, call it normalized or expected.
And the question, just for the folks in the back, is about, as a tech startup focused on sports, what is the best way to stand out from the crowd?
I'll take a little bit of a stab at that one. Just, I think being able to walk in and demonstrate that you've actually done enough with focus groups. So as an example, if you can walk in and say, yeah, we've done these focus groups with athletes. We've taken the data and worked with they and their coaches, as an example, and basically been able to really connect with them. And having that testimonial and having that ability to be absolutely applied and not theoretical is a big thing in my world. So that's one thing, is that, I get a lot of the things that maybe come in my door are, we've got a really good idea, but it's not tested. And it's not tested well enough that if I was to go to an athlete, a top athlete, one of our best, and say, we want to use this, and first question, they'd be like, why, and how have you tested it? So that's one part. The second part is that in some technologies, the accuracy is really important. So, somebody will pitch me on a new measuring device, and they'll say, oh yeah, it's this accurate. And the idea is, say, okay, I want you to go to an independent lab and have it tested. And if you come back to me and they validate that it's that accurate, then we can talk. Because when you're measuring things in 100th of a second, or half a centimeter, you cannot have mistakes in terms of accuracy, and it would be really, really a disservice to the athletes to do anything less than that. So there's a couple of examples.
And just so I don't butcher the summary of your question, if you could walk up and use the mics, that'd be great. Anyone else? Can you come use a mic? Thank you.
You've talked a lot about the power of new technologies on the end of athletes and improving their performance. However, there are plenty of new technologies and apps, such as the home court app on Apple devices, that allows basketball athletes to track and monitor their shooting performance. So what are some of the challenges you see in bringing these kinds of technologies that help athletes to a more consumer level that anyone can download on their phone and use?
Striver is not for consumer consumption. I would love it to be, but we're not there yet. So I don't know if anyone else has a thought, but I would love for you guys to have access to what Ben Roethlisberger does in Striver, but it's just not possible yet.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty good examples. I think particularly in the sports realm, you're dealing with a lot of rights implications there. So even tech applications, however novel they may be, or specific for the shooting example you have, you still have to apply it in a meaningful way that reaches an audience. That typically has to get over a rights hurdle. Either not approved or fundamentally approved. And so that, I think that's always going to be there, which fundamentally has to frame however you approach the market from a consumer perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hey. We'll get him and then you go next.
I'd like to ask any of the panelists who has an opinion. With the role of artificial intelligence just accelerating at an amazing rate in every aspect of our daily life, what role do you see it playing in sports? And do you have a concern that it might have to actually be regulated, like the use of performance-enhancing drugs?
So we're not, at the U.S. Olympic Committee's level, we're, exploring artificial intelligence, but we haven't actually really been able to apply it much. And I think that when the application of it does come, it'll be to try to assist as a teaching tool. because I think one of the things that's really that's lacking in our country a little bit is basically good data and information for coaches so that they can basically learn at a more rapid rate. And I think there is some, if you take, if we have more data and more statistics and more information, and we can essentially use AI to help us refine the precision of that and then use that as a teaching tool so that when coaches go out and teach athletes, as an example, they're able to do it more effectively and it's a better experience for the athletes. I think there's some potential opportunity there. I don't really know anything about regulation on it from that standpoint, but I'm looking at it more from how do you take large amounts of data and refine it in such a way and use it in a positive way to influence the experience for the athletes.
And you could also see an extension of predictive modeling of, I feel like this pitcher's curveball doesn't have its bite. Using a baseball analogy, hopefully you guys got that. But I can see the break is coming to a point of we might have to yank him, right? That's pretty much what I've seen applications of AI going, of trying to attenuate what fatigue looks like, what human degradation looks like in the field.
Yeah, you had a question. Yes. I guess this question is for Danny as much as anyone. Last summer, ESPN interviewed many of the NFL GMs asking if they had used the big data that was released in the big data dump with the RFID chips in the players' shoulder pads. 29, I think it was, GMs were comfortable going on the record as saying the data was useless and that anything that they could learn from data can be learned from film study. As a company that sort of specializes in advanced film studies, do you see this level of advanced data output as complementary to film or as disruptive?
A great question. And it hits on a lot of points that are very big struggles and challenges for us, which is athletes when they're in the elite level are so in their routines, it's unbelievable. They don't want anything. They have their routine, they've done it, especially the ones, for example, Tom Brady, he doesn't need to watch film practically. He knows everything he needs to know. So there's so much ingrained in a routine that they don't care. They don't data schmata. So I'm not surprised that 29 out of 32 GMs said the data is useless because from what we see at the end of the day, they just stick to what they've done. I'd be interested to take your take because you deal with athletes and their routines. They just stick to what they do. And I bet many of us would probably actually do the same thing. We stick to a lot of things that we do. It's hard to bring something new in and adopt it into your routine.
Yeah, and I think so I'll use like wrestling as an example. The combat sports are interesting because sometimes you'll go out and you will not compete against an athlete until you get to the world championships. All you'll have is basically film and data. And the question is, can you consolidate that in such a way that ultimately the athletes find it valuable to understand the trends and the techniques that a competitor uses so that they can be ready to react to those techniques? If somebody scores in the second period every time, it's good to know that, and what move they use to score is really important. So the data and the film actually can be very influential. But you have to change the culture, because the culture might be one like, we just don't do it that way. We just don't operate that way. So you got to introduce it, you got to educate, you got to basically build it into in such a way that the athletes are looking at it and going, that is valuable to me. That's going to make me better. That is going to help me to improve on my performances. And then you get adoption. But that's about the only way to do it. And sometimes you're starting from a very wide spot where people are like, I just don't care about that. That's not the way I work. I didn't get here and be this good by using this information. I got here my way. And so you have to be sensitive to that and be smart about it.
So, may I ask a follow-up question?
Ask a follow-up question.
So, when something like that happens, do you think that the managers of, baseball teams, which have always, or at least for the last several years, looked at analytics as a way to win? The Oakland A's, the Houston Astros have just looked at analytics as how we're going to win the game. Do you think that this opens up the NFL to you know, the first GM or the first coach that says, let's open it up to analytics. Let's let the numbers rule the game and see what happens.
Yeah, you're shaking your head. I'm like, yeah, maybe, definitely maybe. Not like, yeah, I'm not saying absolutely yes, but could be. Could be.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that, you know, if you can create over time a culture where the data is viewed by these professional players as helpful in their careers, helping sustain their career, keep them injury-free, basically, you know, move the needle in terms of what they're capable of doing, I think that will be an interesting question. And if somebody cracked that question earlier than everybody else, might give them an advantage.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you to our guests from Disney. Can you speak to any kind of role that you guys will have in helping ESPN buffer against subscription losses and user declines, particularly as you might help them manage a transition to either some of their content, a lot of their content, or all of their content becoming digital first as maybe potential audiences move that way, and maybe perhaps the cable bundle no longer can be saved. Down the road, I understand, but your role in helping that incredibly valuable asset that Disney has, ESPN, not see reductions and therefore, cost them a great deal of money.
Yeah. We have this year worked very closely within our group at Disney Streaming Services with ESPN on launching ESPN Plus. We actually, both of our teams across the board actually worked a lot in engaging in that launch and are continuing to evolve that product. That product is meant to be its first foray into a meaningful direct-to-consumer business. I can't speak to exactly which programming will sit where, on direct or TV bound, but I would say that ESPN Plus is considered one of the important Disney strategic goals to address, or at least for ESPN, the brand, but ESPN as well to adapt to this landscape.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is our last question. Hi.
It's a good last question, I promise. And my name's Laura Dixon. I'm with Spurs Sports and Entertainment. This question is for each of you. We're here with the Center for Entrepreneurship, the Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation. What are the entrepreneurial or innovative things going on in your business that get you really excited? Maybe just the number one thing. And then the follow-up question for that, because we're here on the campus of UT, what are the skills that you need to see in the workforce to bring those to life and to keep them thriving? And what advice do you have for our audience in getting to that point?
I'm actually going to take a different tact. I think I could talk about, great tech or great business or product innovations. I think some of the stuff that we're excited about is trying to increase diversity within particularly our technical ranks. There's an internal project that we had where effectively women were asked if they wanted to become an engineer. People could just pivot in the middle of their careers doing something completely different in the tech realm. And work their way into a pretty immersive training program. But I think just the different means of engagement to diversify what it means to be a modern tech company. I think. A lot of people responded. There were, I believe we definitely did complete our first class. And those, the people that completed that course are working as engineers across the company.
I'll go next. I think a couple things things, and I want to kind of maybe circle back to your question too, but I think it's a little bit more advice because I don't know how many people in the audience are actually thinking about starting their own company or being in, actually in the sports world. You had said, how do you differentiate yourself? You're pitching to so many people. And I'll tell you, for me, what helped or why we've been successful. So I founded the company about 7, 8 years ago, and really what I did was I surrounded myself with just really amazing people. I know that sounds trite, but then I took it a step further and I hired people that worked at teams. And that is really, I attended great conferences. I don't know if anyone attends like National Sports Forum, the SEAT Conference, ALSD. These are all great places to get exposure and start to get your network going, because I know when I go in to pitch to a team, they have been pitched by 20 to 30 other technologies. So how did you differentiate yourself? So to me, I'm very excited about that, just to be able to mentor. I want to be able to get more women in sports. That's really important for me, and I'm excited about that. We're going to more conferences, and I'm seeing more women there. That's important to me. I don't see there's a lot of women out in this audience, so like I would love to just see that get going more. And I think just that whole network. So I think that I'd love to talk to you after, just because it was a great question, and I think that with this group, there's just a lot of different ways to be able to get in, but if you have people that are in your network that know people at the teams, it's a lot, I don't want to say easier, but at least you'll get a listen. Yeah.
So what I'm excited about for our business is that there are 1 million sports and athletes out there who aren't using our product, and I'd love to get them on our product. I believe it's transformative, so I look forward to increasing the usage of our product. To whether the skills and qualities, I always go back to execution. I think that ideas are great, and everyone in this room has an idea that probably will end up being a billion-dollar company one day, but who's actually going to go execute? And it sounds cliche, but our company, Striver, my brother is the founder and CEO. He brought me on right after. He called me and said, I'm starting a business. I have kind of no idea what I'm doing, but let's go. And we never had the best of anything. Never the best tech, didn't have the best engineers, didn't have the best business backgrounds, but we executed like hell. And we made it. I mean, we're obviously, we could fall apart tomorrow, I guess, but we made it this far. So if you want to know a quality that I look for in a new hire, it's, are you going to be able to roll up your sleeves and execute? Because I'll take the one who can execute over the one who wants to just think about it all day, because the person who's going to execute is going to help me grow the business.
100% agree. 100%. That, and they can wear many hats. They don't come in and silo themselves and say, I only do this. Like at a company like ours, you just have to be able to do everything, and nothing is below you. You just got to just go for it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think especially in our business, the ability to operate in a team environment is hugely important, because you're constantly solving problems and constantly iterating and trying to improve in a variety of different areas. And yeah, the people that I think get kind of hung up and don't evolve are the ones that can't get together with their teammates and essentially say, look, we're going to figure out how to solve this problem, and we're going to do it at a really high velocity. We're not going to, this isn't going to be a 2-year project. This is going to be a 2-week project, and we're going to move it very quickly. And I'm always looking for people that have that sort of mentality, that it's not about me, it's about us. It's about the output of our product on behalf of our customer, which is the athletes. I think on the kind of looking forward piece, the one thing I'd say that I think we can really do well on is, people segment kind of, performance away from the health and wellness of the individual sometimes. And I think that the real magic going forward is going to be to focus on the health and wellness of the individual and make sure that that is completely intact, because at that point, the individual will be able to go and achieve pretty much anything they want to do. It's when that gets a little out of whack where ultimately they're not in a really good place as a person, that I think you begin to lose the capability of encouraging and helping them to be the very best they can be as a competitor. And if we can do that better than anyone else in the world and help the individual, I think, like I say, it's, who knows what's possible. It could be amazing.
Thank you, Alan, Danny, Angelina, Roger. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to the Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation Thank you to the Herb Keller Center for Entrepreneurship. Thank you to the sponsors, Flow Sports. Thank you for the questions. I'm glad you're all able to make it out tonight. Now we are at the reception outside, so let's go do that. Thanks, folks.